Hi friends, Father Kerry here. This is another Holy Spirit moment. This one on Pope Francis's recent letter on the value of literature in spiritual development. In the United States, we don't read very much. The latest government figures suggest that the average American reads only about 15 minutes a day, and most of that 15 minutes is spent online through social media. We don't read many books in the United States these days. Fewer than half of Americans read one book a year. That's a pity, because we know that reading opens us up in ways that are really quite wonderful, and some of those ways are captured in Francis's recent letter. It was published on August 4th, and it is entitled On the Role of Literature in Formation. Interestingly enough, the Pope originally intended this letter to be addressed exclusively to priests because he wanted to maximize priestly empathy for the people whom priests serve. But on second thought, he realized that literature and an opening of empathy is important for all people, Christians and non-Christians, lay people and clerics. And so he addresses this letter to all of us. The importance of literature for our spiritual and our moral development. My guess is that many of you who read literature will already recognize some of the benefits that Pope Francis outlines in this letter. I can speak personally by telling you that I think my own faith journey has been deepened by reading authors such as Graham Greene or the poet R.S. Thomas, or even atheists like José Saramago, the Portuguese author. Pope Francis wants to impress upon us that the literature that we read needn't be Catholic or Christian, but it must be good literature. So, what are some of the benefits of reading good literature? Well, the first benefit, according to the Pope, is that reading a good book, a good poem, can take us out of ourselves. You and I dwell so often in a me-centric universe, don't we? We are so focused upon our own personalities, our own desires, our own aversions, that we never really leave our ego, our personality. But reading a good book can take us out of ourselves, according to the Pope. As the poet T.S. Eliot wisely, I think, said, poetry takes us out of personality. Moreover, once we are taken away from our me-centric universe by entering into a good story in which we aren't center stage, we are able to cultivate the virtue of empathy. When we read about the suffering of a character or a set of characters in a novel, when we watch the tragedy Othello and see the horrible consequences of jealousy and how it destroys lives, we cultivate empathy for those characters. We listen more deeply to their sorrows, but we also listen more deeply to the joys of other characters in other novels and plays and poems. And in so doing, we tone up, if you will, our empathic muscles, our listening muscles, so that when we put the book down and we go out into the world, we are better able to empathize with the joys and the suffering of real people. We become, in short, better moral agents by exposing ourselves to good literature. The American philosopher Richard Rorty famously said that he believes that novels teach us how to be good much more effectively than courses in ethical philosophy. And I think he's absolutely right. We may not be moved to act virtuously in the world by memorizing abstract philosophical formulae, by reading, for example, Aristotle. But we may well be moved to be better people because we have empathetically entered into the story that we read in a novel or that we see in a play. So that's the second virtue of reading good literature. Once we're taken outside of ourselves, we're better able to relate and empathize with others. The third virtue is this. Good literature allows us to think more deeply about our real selves, to go beneath our surfacey personalities, and to ask the question, who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Those famous 3 questions that Gauguin scribbles on one of his Tahitian triptychs. In his letter, the Pope quotes a theologian by the name of René Latreille. And this is what Latreille says about the ability of literature to help us go deeply inside of ourselves, to plumb deeper than our surfacey personality. At its deepest level, writes Latreille, literature has as its purpose a fuller understanding of the mystery of the human person. It originates in the most irreducible core of the person, that mysterious level at which the person is first of all silence and solitude before opening itself to others through the medium of language. Literature is life, conscious of itself. And I think Latreille could almost have said there, literature is the self, finally conscious of itself, conscious of being made in the likeness and image of a wise and loving and compassionate God. Literature helps us, in short, to get in touch with ourselves, to get in touch with others, to move away from an egocentric and narrow perspective on the world and on ourselves. And that brings us to the 4th virtue of reading good literature, according to the Pope. It opens us up to the mystery and the depth of reality in general. The Pope quotes at several places in his letter the 20th century Jesuit theologian Karl Rahner. Rahner, in one of his most wonderful essays entitled Poets and Priests, argues that literature can expose us to the mystery of God in the universe. It can't describe that mystery because mysteries are indescribable. But what it can do through the medium of a novel or a poem or a play is to open us up to the experience of the mystery. Language can gesture at, can evoke the mystery. Rahner beautifully says, all reality sighs for an unveiling. All of God's reality wishes to be known by us as much as we are capable of knowing it, and literature helps us in that endeavor. Rahner also says, speaking specifically about poetry, that poetry opens us up to the infinite, that poetry opens us up to a realm that ordinary, prosaic, utilitarian language simply can't touch. And we will have been primed to be opened up to that mystery of reality by literature's earlier virtues, by literature's weaning us from our self-intoxication, by literature opening us up empathically to others, and by literature helping us to dive deeply into the kinds of creatures we are and to know our real self, our true self, as opposed to our personality selves. My friends, this is such a wonderful letter. I encourage you to read it. It is short, it is user-friendly, you can find it online, and I promise you that if you read it prayerfully and mindfully, it will make you want to immerse yourself even more than you already do in literature, because literature helps us in our spiritual development, in our journeys toward God. I'm Father Kerry, wishing you good reading. I hope that you will subscribe to Holy Spirit Moments. At any rate, I will see you again real soon. Thank you and God bless. Bye-bye.